another episode of Let's Talk Early Years. In studio with me today is the magical Lisa Davage. You can find her on Instagram at Making Learning Magic. Lisa is an educator with an appetite for innovation. Today she shares a little bit about her knowledge and understanding of the Froebelian approach to early years education. Welcome in studio, Lisa Davage.
Thank you very much, Melanie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Tell the audience, who is Lisa Davage?
I am, from the beginning, I'm a parent. I'm a mother of three. I'm a passionate early years educator. I've been working in the early years for over 13 years in the UK and here in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. I'm an early years leader, but I'm also working with the whole of primary. My passion is a child-centred approach to education and really trying not to teach to the inspection rule book and trying to focus on the child and the whole child.
I love that.
Yeah. So my passion is the Froebelian approach, which I'm going to be talking to you about today, and how that can be used in any setting, in any culture, in any world that you're in, to support young children and to move their learning forward.
So the Froebelian approach, is it the newest fad? Is it the well-marketed new approach to early years education? Tell us a little bit about it.
I'm not surprised you said that because there are so many modern day approaches and there are a lot of fads out there, and it can be very confusing for especially those that have just qualified and are going out into the world, into the classrooms, and they're lost. And the framework, the early years framework, is open into so many different interpretations.
Yes.
And it can be sometimes misread and misunderstood by whatever setting you're thrown into. So I understand why you say, is it the new fad? But actually, the Froebelian approach has been around since the 1800s.
Oh.
So it's certainly not new. And it was founded by Friedrich Froebel, whose name is named after, in the 1800s. He was the founder who coined the term kindergarten, which means children's garden.
Yes.
So the garden for children, and that the children within our garden are nourished and nurtured just like plants would be, and supported to grow and expand and to learn just like a plant would grow. So, and there are core principles of the Froebelian approach, which there is some overlap between other Montessori approach, Reggio, Steiner, Waldorf. There's lots of these kind of like similarities. But the differences with the Froebelian approach is that there is a focus on the child and supporting the child with the role of the adult. But for me, the thing that really stands out is the focus on the connection with nature. So that's something I'm really passionate about and have been since a very young age. I grew up outside in nature with my family, in the forest, in the woods with my wellies on. So for me, that's something I really wanted to bring here to the UAE. Although we're in the desert, this is something that I've been passionate about. And so that's kind of this. We can elaborate more on that depending on how this goes. But.
Absolutely. Lisa, how would you describe then the core principles of the Froebelian approach? What's the foundation of it?
So the 7 principles of the Froebel, the core principles, are the foundations of the approach. But the most important ones to me are learning through play. So the children having a chance to engage and learn independently, however, be carefully facilitated by the adult.
I was going to say, learning through play is a huge buzzword right now. Yeah. And can also sound like chaos. Yeah. Sounds like the teacher sitting in a corner, scrolling through her Instagram and hoping that everyone is safe, So tell us about how Froebel envisions learning through play in the classroom.
Yeah, so learning through play is basically the child-led activities and interactions. It's a holistic approach. So it's about going to the child and observing and perhaps intervening and facilitating the play. So the adult has quite a role in the Froebelian approach.
A guide, right?
Yeah, it's about those high quality interactions. Yes. It's about the correct questioning without making a child stop what they're doing and move on to something else, or feel like they're not doing something right. There's a very careful balance, and you have to be highly skilled and have a good understanding and a good pedagogy to be able to support this kind of environment in the correct way. So learning through play is also important in the environment that you provide. So the continuous provision that's provided to the children, not only it's about setting it out first thing in the morning and then leaving it for the rest of the day, it's about adapting it and changing it based on the needs of the child and bringing different things and introducing enhancement into different areas of learning to support each individual child.
I'm hearing you speak about a teacher that is attentive and intentional about her classroom.
Yeah.
A teacher that is listening to the children's engagements and listening to their prompts and then setting up accordingly.
Absolutely.
Is that a foundation of learning through play?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about not having something in your mind that you want a child to achieve before you set out an activity or you start the day.
Yeah.
It's about guiding the child through what they're interested in, so they have like extremely high levels of engagement, and the output is something phenomenal. And that's when those wow moments happen, and that's when you're going to get the best from that child, and they're going to make the most progress. And not to put a ceiling on things, and to say like, this is what I've put out for you, this is what I expect you to produce. It's not an output program. It's about providing different opportunities and meshing and merging them together to meet the needs of each child.
Okay, and you spoke about nature. In the UAE, for the better part of the year, nature is not necessarily accessible to us. And then we're also speaking to a very broad audience, Lisa. Not everybody necessarily lives in the UAE, so not everybody necessarily has access to a huge outdoor playground, a lovely grass patch. You spoke about how you grew up. Not everybody necessarily has access to that. So how can we bring the Froebelian approach into our settings wherever we're located?
Absolutely. We're in a city as well, so you may be confined to being indoors. So I think it's about connection with nature. So being connected with your community. There's a strong community connection, whether that be the family, the location you're in the region or in the world, and children being aware of that, and knowing what's outside their doorstep, and knowing and understanding that this is what we're working with, and this is where I'm from, or perhaps where I'm living now. There's lots of expats here, for example. And I think that nature can look very different. In most people's head, nature is green grass, rivers, trees, mud. But actually, there's so much more to nature than that. You can take the children into the desert. You can take the children onto the beach. You can take the children to a local park, and there will be nature. I know that in Dubai, things are quite manicured, and, we don't like to see things that are kind of like rugged or real. But there are pockets of that. And you can, if you have a space, you can create that very easily here or wherever you are. And I think it's allowing freedom for things not to look beautiful all the time, and that the learning environments don't have to look perfect. They don't have to look manicured, pristine. I think that sometimes the best things come from a pile of mud and a few sticks and spades.
I like that. I think our under-resourced educators would like to hear that too. That whatever they don't have access to wouldn't necessarily limit the learning that could take place under their tutelage. What else, Lisa? What are some of those other core principles that really strike a chord with you personally?
Symbolism, and Froebel had a strong emphasis on symbols. So everything has a meaning to someone, and so each child will be produced with something, and it can represent something. So this kind of links into the open-ended resources. So instead of going to set up your role play area and having your fireman outfit and your nurse's outfit, and this is what it is, and you can't really change it. It's not really movable. It's already cookie.
It is what it is.
So I think that moving away from that, and perhaps scarves and ropes and clips can represent whatever the child wants them to be. So their symbolism. So this is a cup. This is a yellow cup. We drink from it. But they might find something in the garden that could represent a cup, and then they can role play with that. So I love that idea, because that's exactly what children do naturally. They start to make associations. Within what they know and what they think they can create with what they've got. And they're just so good at using their imagination. But we actually put a cap on that by making things too straightforward and too closed.
Yeah.
So I think open-ended through their own symbolism and sort of expression of their understanding of the real world around them, making those connections is really important.
Right. So we're speaking about community, we're speaking about bringing nature indoors, we're speaking about values.
Mm-hmm.
Froebel mentions something called occupations. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually occupations is how I got into the Froebelian approach.
Oh.
So I was actually inspired by Pete Morehouse. He's a travelling tutor for the Froebel Trust, and he came to Dubai for an early years conference.
I'm going to interject you there, and I believe that you are the UAE's only accredited tutor. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yeah, I am the only Froebel Trust travelling tutor in the UAE.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And we can find you through your Instagram, is that right?
Yeah, you can. And you can email the Froebel Trust directly if you're interested in any training or courses for your setting or you as an individual. And they're based you can do them face-to-face or online, but most of the ones in the UAE are online, but there's face-to-face in the UK.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying, sorry.
So yeah, I was inspired by another tutor, basically. This is going back now in sort of 2019. He came to visit. He was talking about woodwork in the early years and how we can learn so much from observing children, working with children with the woodwork. So obviously I was like, what do you mean? Woodwork, real tools, that's very risky. It's very dangerous. Children could get hurt. Parents are not going to agree here. However, I went back and did a bit of research, bought his book, which is called Learning Through Woodwork. And I was inspired. I found out that he was inspired by the Froebelian approach to learning. I did a bit of research about that and I kind of went down an avenue and I was actually working in a setting which was really focused on sustainability and eco-literacy. And so then I actually developed a scheme called Woodtopia. So I basically made woodwork benches out of pallets. I went to Ace Hardware and got tools that were appropriate for children. I went through all the health and safety training for the staff, and we actually started delivering lessons and allowing children to explore through woodwork.
Wow.
So that was called Woodtopia, and that is something... Yeah, the children loved it. The families were involved. It was a really nice community.
I cannot imagine. It sounds like a dream.
It was amazing.
Yes.
And so woodwork is actually one of the occupations. So it is kind of what it says on the tin. An occupation is kind of teaching children about a skill, something that they can use and apply throughout their lives.
Yes.
So woodwork is one of the occupations, but we've also got sewing, cooking, threading, weaving, all those kind of things, which is like a skill-based learning.
Yeah.
And children need to be taught and they need to be guided, but it's also open-ended and it's very child-led at the same time. So that's what the occupations are.
In reality, in the classroom, sitting there with 15 learners, how am I going to teach woodwork? How am I going to teach weaving? How am I going to teach this kind of risky play and actually do a little bit of safeguarding, a little bit of teaching implementation? Help us, Lisa.
Yeah, I think it's okay not to try and do it all at once.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And in reality, I think it's good to focus on one thing at a time, as in you introduce it to the families, you introduce it to the children, and it would need to be taught at the beginning and the children would need to be immersed in the experience, and then eventually we can get to the point where it becomes part of a continuous provision. Obviously woodwork would need close supervision and there's a ratio and things like that, but the things like weaving and origami and paper folding and the threading, those kind of skills are really great skills. The cooking, obviously you need some adult help with that, so you need to look at how you can manage that with ratios.
So it's a collaboration with the educator, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hands-on learning and collaborating with that educator.
I think it's about that balance as well, Melanie, about having that exploration and the inquiry side where children are learning through play, but then also giving them the skills for life and giving that time as well.
I think that's so important in today's day and age, Lisa, where we're finding that the traditional workplace is becoming almost extinct.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
more and more young people are moving away from academia and going into what was formerly known as an occupation, where they've actually used the skill of their hands.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? I would speak about the generation of our parents who actually made a living from woodwork or sewing or that kind of thing. So I think it's really important, you know. And when I thought about a meeting with you today, I thought about how does the Froebelian approach really relate to today's learning when we've got so much access to innovation, we've got so much access to technology. What is the point? You know, and you've so beautifully elaborated that, you know, this is, it's foundational learning, it's life skills.
It is.
Yeah?
It really is, yeah, absolutely. And Froebel supports the learning through play that we've mentioned before through his gifts. So he doesn't call them toys because they are a gift that is given to a child to help them with their learning.
Oh.
So the gifts are actually designed to use from the infancy. So, for example, they have the soft thread balls, which are soft, squishy. They can be hung, they can be swung, you can roll them. And then the next stage would be like the wooden spheres. So comparing them in weight, banging them on the surfaces to hear the noises, the
multi-sensory.
Yeah, and it's about this is just an example. There are many Froebel gifts which I could talk to you a long time for many hours about. But there's also the wooden blocks and the block play, and how there's so many different things that you can do with wooden blocks of different sizes.
Of course,
and
yes.
they are presented to the children in a special box, in a gift box, and they are for children to open and to be curious with and to learn from. And even those gifts could be as interesting for a 3-month-old as they can be for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or even beyond, because it's what they do with them. You know, you can start to introduce science with these for the older children.
Yes.
The understanding of different materials and mass and weight and things like that, how they spin, how they turn, you can suspend them. And it's just really looking at the basics. We don't need to spend a lot of money on an array of different resources that are perhaps very closed off and not open-ended. When you really strip things back, they had it right in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So let's pause, reflect on what we're doing now in this modern day approach with these new fads and ideas, and remember why we're doing it. We're doing it for the child.
Yeah.
You know, that we have these curriculums, you know, wherever you are in the world, and you're influenced by the curriculum and the framework and the inspection framework as well. We can't forget that here. A lot of educators that are watching this that are based in the UAE, we are under pressure to conform.
Yeah.
However, we need to remember that the child
is at the heart of it.
The child is the curriculum.
Yeah.
The curriculum is the child.
Yes.
And that is what's so important, and we mustn't let go of that.
I love that,
Yeah,
Lisa.
it's really important.
I love that. I feel your passion just speaking to me. I feel that. Lisa, going back to the core principles of the Froebelian approach, what else would you like to share with us?
I think it's really important that we're teaching the children. We've talked about the skills for life and lifelong learners, but it's how do we do that? Mm-hmm. And one of the core principles is autonomous learners. Mm-hmm. So it's about teaching the children to be learners. And that sounds quite confusing, but it's about how we demonstrate things and encourage their behaviour rather than leading them to activities. It's about reassurance, praise, guiding them, taking them outside to do things like risky play, jumping in muddy puddles and then, you know, perhaps getting wet and not worrying about it, trying something, jumping from a height, you know, and not being afraid. I think going outside and going back to that connection with nature really develops that, because through using physical activity, and often that does involve going outside because you've got more space to be free, to run, to climb, to jump. Yeah. That autonomy comes, but often that needs to be sort of reassured by the adult, and that's where, again, the role of the adult comes in. A lot of the principles you can see are interconnected and overlap, and they really marry with each other and work together to create that whole sort of idea of the Froebelian approach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So autonomous learners with that guidance of the educator in the classroom, outdoors. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Other principles you want to share?
I want to mention about how the Froebelian approach can be applied to any framework, because I'm mainly thinking about the British framework, because that's what I have worked with for most of my career and most of my educational experience has been working with the EYFS framework from the UK. And obviously the Froebel Trust is based in the UK.
UK, yes.
But the Friedrich Froebel was German, and there are different trusts around the world that link to the Froebel Trust. So I want to just mention that, you know, any curriculum can take this approach and make it work, because at the end of the day, it's very focused around child development, and it's very focused around the whole child.
Yes.
Yeah, and that holistic approach. So I think it's really important to remember that although we're all trying to find different ways to teach our children and perhaps have different outcomes and different ways that we have to assess our children, the way that we can really foster child development and progress is through looking at the child. Again, going back to that child-centered approach, that personalized approach to learning. I think that's just really important for me to mention.
I appreciate that, Lisa. I think it's quite profound that you're saying that we can implement a curriculum, which you mentioned is the child, using sort of an eclectic model, a sort of eclectic implementation of teaching and learning. It is reliant on us as educators to go back and inform ourselves, to take professional development, like our podcast is right here, right? To go and join you on the Froebelian network in the UAE. It's for us as educators to expand on our personal and professional knowledge to be able to empower those autonomous learners in the classroom, and for us to be able to facilitate risky play in the classroom.
Absolutely. I think, Melanie, it's about confidence in what we believe in as well. I think it's very easy to go down the route of, you know, my job is to teach a child to read and write and to count or whatever, you know, and those are subjects that are really important in life, but what lays the foundations underneath that? And I think we need to remember that. And it's hard. I think it's about, for me, you know, I've worked in settings where, you know, there have been constraints, and it's about finding that balance, but just not losing focus and always just reminding yourself and to strip it back. And what is it that we want the children to be able to achieve as people, as humans, as little learners? And then you really can't go wrong.
I love that. I love your passion, Lisa, and thank you so much. Do you have last words for us?
Well, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me to talk about this approach, because it is something that isn't really talked about much here in the UAE. As far as I'm aware, there are no Froebelian tutors such as myself here in the UAE. So I'm with the Froebel Trust. I'm endorsed, so I'm available to provide training to anyone that wants it. But also I'm here to talk about my network as well. So the Froebelian approach, there's a UAE network that I've started, and I'd love to invite anybody along to come and just talk about, ask questions, share ideas. You know, if someone wants to say, how would it look in my setting? You know, I'm in quite a formal school, or how would it look in my setting? You know, I'm in a nursery that's just about to open and I can do whatever I want. So it's like about those different discussions as professionals, and even parents that might want to know about how to support their child at home. Perhaps they're homeschooling them, or perhaps they've just got a 1-year-old and they're just having some time off and they're enjoying their child at home and want to know how the Froebelian approach would work for their child.
I love that. I love that you're extending your professional knowledge and understanding to empower the community. That is what this podcast is about. And that is why I love bringing my friends like you onto the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you.
Is because of that generosity and because of that time sacrifice that you're willing to invest, not to expand a network, but to expand knowledge and education to the world outside of ourselves.
Exactly.
So for that, I'm so grateful. I'm really so in awe, and I'm excited to see where this is going to go in the UAE.
Me too.
So,
I think it's about spreading awareness and trying to guide educators. Early years education is a minefield, like I've said. And sometimes you can just feel so lost, and you can be easily manipulated by the setting that you've been employed by or by the influences of others. And I think it's about find what you love, find what you're passionate about, and then follow that that's going to be your pedagogy. Everybody's got core values and core beliefs, and I think that's what's important. Once you find those, that's it. You're never ending on your journey of learning and educating.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Melanie. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot.
What an informative conversation with Lisa Davage today. You can find her on Instagram on Making Learning Magic. That's Lisa Davage at Making Learning Magic. If you've enjoyed our episode, which I know you have, I would love for you to follow us on Instagram, of course, and then to go and find us on Spotify, on YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Go and go and subscribe, leave us your reviews. We would love to hear from you. This is Let's Talk Early Years. See you next time.